The year is 1992, and it feels like I am just living the same day over and over again. Groundhog Day, coming up.
It's Groundhog Day!
Groundhog time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
Weatherman Phil Connors is spending the day in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania.
Phil? Ned! Ned Ryerson, I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show.
Bing!
Bang!
But Phil's about to find out he's not just stuck in Puxatawney.
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
Chance of departure today, 100%.
He's stuck
It's Groundhog Day!
in Groundhog Day.
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
Phil?
Ned Ryerson?
Bang!
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again?
At first, he was a little anxious.
Phil? What?
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
I'd say the chance of departure is 80%.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Random Rewatch. This is Mike, and we are here doing 1993's Groundhog Day. Sorry about the extended delay in getting this episode out. I was actually a little bit sick. I had nothing serious. I had a cold, but it was affecting me, and I had a very, very throggy voice for a couple of days, but actually for about a week and a half. But I am better now, thanks to some rest and some antibiotics, and we are off, and you can listen to my dulcet tones once more. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby! Yeah!
And speaking of dulcet tones, we have a film by Harold Ramis starring none other than Bill Murray.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Give me the Star Wars, no less than man.
So this was a movie that was kicking around for a while. The initial writer, Danny Rubin, had seen Interview with a Vampire, and he began to wonder what it would be like when immortality becomes pointless, I guess is the best way to put it. In his mind, immortality wasn't necessarily about having a long life, but it was about repetition. Or at least he wanted to explore the idea of immortality not being about, oh, I've lived for 1,000 years, but what if I live the same day over and over again for 1,000 years? That type of thing. And so this is where he started to get into writing the screenplay. So in the meantime, you had Harold Ramis, and Harold Ramis was looking for a little bit different film than he was involved with recently. You know, Ramis had started in the late 70s as a writer on films like Animal House and Meatballs. 1980, he stepped up to write and direct Caddyshack. He was a writer on Stripes, but he also acted in Stripes, directed Vacation, and then he was a writer in films like Ghostbusters, Back to School, Caddyshack 2, unfortunately, Ghostbusters 2, some of which he was in. And so he was looking to get away from kind of the light comedy, like the slapstick stuff, and he wanted to sink his teeth into something a little bit more. And so he came across this script that Rubin had been working on and been shopping around a little bit. And there was an idea between were they going to do this as a studio film or do this as an indie, which would give them a little bit more control. But eventually they opted to have it come out and be a studio film. Initially, Harold Ramis wanted Tom Hanks, to do this. Tom Hanks did not think that his audience at the time would accept this kind of a role for him, because it was a bit of a darker role. And not only was it a darker role, it was also a very kind of unlikable character, at least as written on the page. And he had played unlikable characters before. He had just finished doing League of Their Own, Jimmy Dugan, maybe not necessarily a likable character, but Tom Hanks makes him likable. But he didn't think this was the right role for him. Ramis then tries to get Michael Keaton. Keaton read the script. He didn't understand it. He didn't really see what the point of the script was. There was kicking about Chevy Chase possibly getting involved in this, but then ultimately they wound up with Bill Murray, who in real life was miserable and grouchy, and so I guess he was kind of typecast as Phil Connors in this. The initial idea, this is crazy. The initial idea for Rita's role was Tori Amos, the singer, who I don't think has ever been in a film, and she certainly hadn't been in a film at that point. But obviously, they wound up going with MacDowell. Bill Murray brought Rubin back in after he had sold the script. He was kind of out of it, and Ramis had rewritten it. But Murray brought Rubin back in to do some touch-ups on the script and kind of be kind of a consultant on the script. And apparently things got so contentious between Ramis and Murray that Ramis had Rubin be like kind of the Murray whisperer. He was the guy who went and would go talk to Murray and explain things in the script and any changes that were happening, and was acting as kind of a buffer between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. And apparently Murray wasn't very happy about that. One of the big conflicts in getting the script ready was that the studio wanted there to be a reason that Phil was stuck in this time loop. And Rubin he intentionally did not put one in there. For one, he didn't think that the cause of it was important, but he also thought that the fact that Phil was trapped in this time loop without any reason, without any understanding of why this happened to him, makes him more relatable and kind of is really kind of the point of the whole story. It's like, because if you know the why, then maybe there's a way that you could get out of it. But he doesn't even know the why, so he doesn't even know what kind of solution he's looking for, or if there even exists to be a solution. Whereas if you said that there was this particular reason, he could goal towards fixing whatever that problem was. Apparently, the way they got around this was they wrote a scene which explained why Phil was in this time loop, and apparently it had to do with his ex-girlfriend who had put some kind of voodoo curse on him or something. But they left it till last to be filmed, and basically they had run out of time and money and didn't get to film it. So this is what a good director does when the studio tries to interfere with your vision. You run out the clock. So this film, you may be surprised to learn, this film was not filmed in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania. In fact, it was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois. They thought that the Puxatawney didn't really have a downtown kind of area like Nobbler's Green. So they found this town in Illinois, and they managed to secure the hotel space and the shooting scenes and shooting locations and everything that they needed. Other fun fact is they did not have a groundhog. And apparently trained groundhogs are not really a thing. So they wound up trapping a couple of groundhogs. So the groundhogs that they used in the film were wild groundhogs that had been in captivity for a couple of weeks. Apparently, during the scene in the truck, and we'll talk about it in a bit, but apparently in the scene in the truck with Phil and the groundhog bit Bill Murray a couple of times, which I'm sure did not improve his already cranky mood. All in all, this was supposed to be a very grueling shoot from all accounts. It was cold. They were kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Apologies to Woodstock, Illinois. Murray and Ramis were not getting along. They were arguing with each other constantly. Murray was being a bit of a prima donna, and so it just was not a fun experience for basically anybody involved. So, getting into the film, and this is I haven't seen this film in a really, really long time. This is one of those movies that I probably watched like on a monthly basis back in the day when it was in like heavy rotation on cable. I mean, everybody saw this movie, everybody would quote this movie, but then, it's probably been since the 90s, the mid to late 90s, honestly, since I've seen this. Maybe I've seen it, once in the last 15, 20 years, but I don't even think so. And it's so much different than I remember. You wind up remembering like the big strokes, and there's so much little things in here. But I also want to say that this is a very, very different film. Having watched this film I'm in my 50s now, and having watched this film now versus watching it like in my 30s, this film hits very differently. To me, honestly, Phil becomes much more of a relatable character because of what he's going through and almost the futility of his life and the frustrations that he has even before the time loop starts. The frustrations he has with his career and with his life. These are things that it's a lot easier to relate to, I guess, the older you get. So it's not really much of a wonder that this is not a film that really stayed in the zeitgeist all that long. I guess people kind of aged out of it, and younger people just really couldn't relate to it very well, and probably still can't. Just because I think it just feels a little bit different once you've had some life experience. It also caught a bit of a resurgence, I guess, post COVID. It's basically kind of the perfect pandemic movie. If you think about, those of us who were in an area that was kind of locked down, like I was during the height of the pandemic. I wasn't working. My job was shut down. There was no socializing. We weren't even going to church. Everything was being done online, and so basically you were just like kind of cooped up in your house, or maybe you wrapped yourself up, went to the store. But it was very monotonous and every day did really seem to run into the other. Having lived through that and now watching Phil go through this stuff, it becomes very relatable what he's going to. So one of the interesting things that I also didn't catch when I was younger, that's pretty apparent now, is that when Ruben, laid this thing out, he basically puts Phil through the stages of grief, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Phil goes through all of these moments in his various stages in the time loop. It's weird that it wasn't more obvious to me, but again, maybe that's just life experience. But he really does kind of go through this. So we get to the first, shall I say, the second day. We go through the first day, obviously, with them driving out from Pittsburgh out to Puxatawny. Phil being, sarcastic and miserable, having to stay in his own hotel and having, wanting very little to do with the whole Groundhog thing. Then the storm, trying to get out from the storm, and then he wakes up, and we're back in the first loop, right? The first repeat. So we start to wonder about this. Like, is this a dream? Is this deja vu? Especially if you haven't seen this film, it's like kind of like, so what's really going on here with him? Obviously, the same song and the same guys on the DJs, and then he runs into the same people. He runs into the guy in the hallway. He runs into Ned Ryerson, who is amazing throughout this whole film.
Phil? Hey, Phil? Phil Connors? Phil Connors, I thought that was you.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for watching.
Hey. Now, don't you tell me you don't remember me, because I sure as heck fire remember you.
Not a chance.
Ned! Ryerson! Needle-nosed Ned the head. Come on, buddy. Case Western High. Ned Ryerson, I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show. Bing! Ned Ryerson got the shingles real bad senior year, almost didn't graduate. Bing! Again! Ned Ryerson, I dated your sister Mary Pat a couple times till you told me not to anymore. Well?
Ned Ryerson?
Bing!
Bing!
And I gotta say, Stephen Tobolowsky apparently has made like a cottage industry out of this role, doing appearances and conventions and all that kind of stuff. And so, as he goes through his various iterations of this loop, his first thing he begins to realize is that there's no consequences for his actions, right? He could eat as much as he wants. He could rob a bank. He could steal a car. He could really do whatever he wants to do. It doesn't matter. He could wind up in jail. It doesn't matter, because the next morning he's going to wake up in his hotel room again. And then he realizes that he remembers things day to day. And so he begins to use that on Nancy in order to develop a relationship with her. It's really kind of creepy when you think about it. And then he tries this whole, multiple approach thing with Rita, and, every day they have lunch, and he learns a little bit more about her, and then starts to feed that back to her, French poetry and all that stuff. He gets her to talk about what kind of a man she would like, and then like kind of equates himself to all of the attributes that she says.
Who is your perfect guy?
Well, first of all, he's too humble to know he's perfect.
That's me.
He's intelligent, supportive, funny.
Intelligent, supportive, funny. Me.
He's romantic and courageous.
Me also.
He's got a good body, but he doesn't have to look in the mirror every 2 minutes.
I have a great body, and sometimes I go months without looking.
He's kind, sensitive, and gentle. He's not afraid to cry in front of me.
This is a man we're talking about, right?
He likes animals and children, and he'll change poopy diapers.
Does he have to use the word poopy?
Oh, and he plays an instrument, and he loves his mother.
I am really close on this one.
And then obviously he goes through his, I guess, depressive phase where, you have various suicide attempts where he steps out in front of a truck, where he steals the truck, he steals a groundhog, and he steals the truck. That truck scene is just amazing. I mean, a lot of that is apparently Murray just kind of vamping with the groundhog.
That's not bad for a quadruped. You gotta check your mirrors, just side of your eye. Side of your eye. That's it. Hey, they're chasing us. Come on, make it fun. Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
The whole "don't drive angry" thing. There's the with the toaster, and so we go. He goes through that whole process and realizes that's not going to do anything. He's got the guys in the bar who he keeps edging on and trying to get them to do crazy stuff with him, taking advantage of the fact that they're drunk or they're alcoholics. Phil's not a really great guy, not a nice guy. Everything that he's doing, he's kind of doing like for this edge, even with the piano instructor, where he's like, okay, I'm just gonna take music lessons, and every day he goes and he's obviously better and better and better when he shows up, but that's all part of his plan to get with Rita. But I think what's really interesting is the way they kind of pull in the idea that Phil eventually moves into an area where he legitimately wants to change. Initially it's all very cynical and it's all very, what can I do for me next? And how can I if I'm going to be trapped in this time loop, I might as well make it enjoyable for me. And even, the stuff that he's doing with Rita. But I think eventually he starts to realize that he actually does care about these people in the town, and some of them. When he's going around the diner with Rita, he's taken the time to learn about all of these people. And I think it goes beyond, at least it seems like it goes beyond, this is just part of his shtick so that he could get with her. It seems to be that he has actually taken the time to learn about each one of these people, and not only learn about them, but offer to assist them in some meaningful ways, like, the young couple who are looking to get married. And he winds up more and more like trying to help people each time through the loop. When he goes through, there's that one sequence where he goes through and he's like saving people from having accidents and things, to the point with the old man, the old homeless man. He's constantly trying to save this guy, whether he's buying him some soup or taking him inside so that he's warm, getting him clothes, doing CPR on him, bringing him to the hospital, whatever the situation is. And every single time this guy dies, up to the point where the nurse just tells him, it's like, sometimes people die, and begins to kind of shape into the kind of the existential nature of what Phil is doing, and in this time loop, it's like he can change some things, but you start to question, what can he really change if he can't, through all his efforts, solve this case where this guy is going to die that seems pretty simple. Then is there really any hope for him to get out of there? And so the other question is also, is like, why doesn't he just stay up? I mean, staying up till 6 a.m. is not really that hard. And I don't know if it's the nature of the loop. I don't know if it's, maybe he does stay up past 6 o'clock, but eventually falls asleep and then just resets to 6 o'clock. I don't really know the reason. And I think, just like The Cause, I don't think it's important. I think what's important in this film is not all the this isn't Star Trek, right? It's not the mechanics of why he's in this loop and how he gets out of this loop, and is there a way to think his way out of it or trick his way out of it. What's important is the story and the evolution that Phil goes through while he's in this loop for however long it is. And there's been a big question. I mean, people have been talking for 30 years trying to figure out, how long has Phil Connors actually been in this time loop? And guys have used things like trying to figure out, well, how long does it take to be able to play the piano as well as he can? How long does it take to be able to do all these other things that he does? How long would it take him to learn French? People have done entire analysis on the various skills that Phil learned, ice sculpture and playing piano and learning languages and all this stuff, and come up with ideas like between 30 and 40 years that he was trapped in this loop. Rubin himself thought it was maybe closer to 70 or 80 years. Somebody I read did like a really in-depth analysis of like how many hours it would take to get that proficient in piano, how many hours it would take to get that proficient in ice sculpture, how many hours it would take to learn the level of French that he was able to learn, and to do some of the other things that he did, and also counting like how many loops were seen and how many were mentioned throughout the whole thing, and came up with this idea of 12,000 days, which is about 34 years or 33 years, somewhere around there. Harold Ramis, who was raised Jewish but began to take on a Buddhist lifestyle, talked about how it takes 10,000 years for a soul to evolve, and was thinking that this may have been an entire lifetime, at least, 70, 80, 100 years that Phil was trapped in this. But I mean, the real answer is that it took exactly as long as it took for Phil to evolve and to become a different person, or the person that he needed to be, in order to get out of it. And we have no idea how long it is. And you know what? I'm kind of okay with that. The movie leaves a lot of loose ends. It leaves a lot of things dangling, and that's okay, because the like I said, the focus on this is the story and the character arc that Phil goes through, not so much everything that's around it. Yeah. So how did this wind up? It's about a $14 million budget. It's $105 million at the box office. It was the 10th highest grossing film of 1993. It's got a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars in his first review. But later, I guess after a number of years, he rewatched it and he upped his review to 4 stars, and came out and basically said he had been wrong about it, and that it's much more of a film than he had first considered it to be. So way to go, Raj. This film has gotten a lot of love from various religious groups, including the aforementioned Buddhists, because they like the idea of growth and reincarnation and all of that. Jewish groups, Christian groups. There's a lot of different groups that have found their way into this film and seen something that they like to take out of it. So perhaps the longest legacy of this film was the fight between Murray and Ramis after this. 2 guys who had worked together so many times at Second City and on various films, Caddyshack, Meatballs, Stripes, Ghostbusters, the various Ghostbusters films. And apparently it was many, many years before these 2 guys even spoke to one another. But towards the end of Harold Ramis' life, apparently they did get back together and did kind of reunite and patch things up, which is good. This film's had a long legacy. This is one of those movies that's kind of like Die Hard, where there's like, oh, Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a train, Die Hard at the airport. Well, I mean, I guess Die Hard 2 was Die Hard at the airport. But there's a lot of like, oh, this is Groundhog Day with aliens for, Edge of Tomorrow, or Groundhog Day in the desert, for Palm Springs, or other films like Happy Death Day or whatever have this kind of repeating theme to them, and it's kind of become a trope. A lot of directors and writers have said that they've referenced this film, and this film has, been an influence for them. This movie made it to the AFI list. I think it was number 34 on the AFI list. It was ranked, a number of different articles and stuff that rank films have put it up. Rotten Tomatoes puts it up on its 200 most essential movies list. Slate, Rolling Stone, AV Club, a lot of these magazines, that when they do lists of movies that you have to see, Groundhog Day is often listed. So that means that you should probably go watch it. If you haven't seen it, go watch yourself Groundhog Day and enjoy it. And thanks for listening. We will catch you back next time, and we appreciate you all the time. Thank you.